So what happens and why we are so interested in data? Because of this, the tools of analysis that are available at our disposal, right? That's something makes data so attractive. So if we have moved on, so all this evolution that I am talking about, right, of the digital data and also the platforms and the storage capacities that has evolved over time, it has moved on like this. So this is the y-axis is basically a time, the temporal trajectory of the analysis, and this is what the analysis tells you. So I'll give you first one is the descriptive insight, right. So if I ask you, so what is a descriptive insight? If I ask you how many women or what is the percentage of women in India in engineering education, right, that's a descriptive insight that data gives you. Now from that, if I want a diagnostic insight is I want to find out why. Right? I want to find out an explanation that let us say why only 2% of engineering students in India are women. So if I want to find an explanation of that, I want why did it happen, and that is a diagnostic insight. You can all get this PPTs later, so it's okay. So now how do you do that? That's when you need these relationships that we are talking about between different columns. So it's not just your gender and engineering education column, you need to understand where do you come from, right? What's your age, what's your family background. All these relationships needs to be created for me to be able to explain why this happened, right? Now the next is predictive. So predictive is when I say that, okay, given my diagnostic insights, given my understanding of the relationships or the demographics of women who come to engineering education, I predict that this segment of women, right, this particular combination of demographics of women are likely to come into engineering education. So let us say I can predict on the basis of this diagnostic insight that by 2020, so many percentage of women will be in engineering education in India, right. Then come prescriptives. This is where we are pretty much right now. This is what your recommender system works on. This is what you do, why you do so, you're relating it to other things that you do, and so you are likely to read this, so I prescribe this to you. Does that make sense? So, but this is not the end. We are moving to something called cognitive insight. This is what AI, machine learning, all these things are going to do. So, from descriptive to prescriptive will all be done by the machine. We don't need to do it anymore. That's what we are headed towards with machine learning and AI. Now the implications for this. So I won't say it's an implication, but just to give a sense of what it means when we move from prescriptive to cognitive. So let's say we were talking about algorithms in the couple of sessions back, right? So when we are talking about algorithms, our algorithms will be able to say that if these are the women who are not coming to higher education, the reason they are not coming to higher education is their English education is not good enough. So let us focus on English education, that's the prescriptive one. And on the basis of that, people who are not following that prescriptions, they will be out of it. So you will never look at them as your probable, what do you call them, pool or the sample who will be likely to be in engineering educations, right? Is this slide clear? Okay. So now how this is all happening? So I'm trying to connect the data platforms that we talked about and the algorithms that are running. So these are the data techniques. So it was first, I mean, I'm sure people who have been doing this for a long time would know this better than me, is this rule based to machine learning algorithms that we have moved on to. right? So, these are the techniques through which now the data that is being generated, that all the different kinds of data that we were talking about, with the help of the data platforms, right, that we just elaborated on, we are running certain algorithms through those data and are able to create insights. And in terms of the techniques that we are using, right, to run these algorithms on the data has reached, this is the current state we are in. So, anybody wants to explain how machine learning algorithms are different, or what's the unique about machine learning algorithm? Shravya?
Different from what?
So, all that we were doing till we have reached till the recommender system, right? That works, I mean, that we pretty much experience on a daily basis, right? But we are now trying to move on to the machine learning that we have as an users, as an end users, we have not experienced it yet. So, if when it comes a reality, what it is going to look like?
So some of the models have also come under machine learning, but the recent state of the art kind of machine learning techniques, they have a kind of complicated models that usually draw insights in nonlinear nature. And these are extremely hard to explain, and they have like much strong capacity to draw in insights, draw conclusions, and it's like, it's more like they have become extremely complicated in terms of.
You want to talk about the neural network a bit?
Sure, but to what context am I talking?
So, I am saying that, see, for example, when I used to the Facebook, or let us say, so I have been reading, so let us say I read Guardian or New York Times through my Facebook, right. So, all those articles that are published on these two websites always come into my news feed on the Facebook. That is also an algorithm, right, and that is where the recommendation engines works, right, that is where the analysis. I am saying when we have machine learning algorithms doing these jobs, how it is going to change my experience?
So, the machine learning algorithms can also produce recommendations. The thing is that particular deep learning algorithms, they are much more, so there is a limitation, computational limitations to previous algorithms. They can only produce this limited amount of connections, they can draw limited amount of connections between data and stuff like that. So, the more harder connections can be drawn with current machine learning systems. So, it's more powerful in the sense that it can make inferences that are long-range inferences, like how my patterns are similar to somebody else, or how I'm doing my patterns of daily life, and how social media is working, and things like that. So these could generally take up small connections and tiny surrounding connections, but these can be long-range connections and pretty accurate connections.
And it also, I think, what would be an interesting part of machine learning algorithms is the self-corrections, right. So, it can learn on the fly. That is, yes. So, yeah.
We have is like, we have a different multi-layered concept in deep learning. So we have different way of the connection between different things depends on the weights that they have been assigned. So as and when we feed in more data to the system, the value of these weights between connections changes. So that is basically how recommendations and suggestions are provided. So the higher the weight that will be, so it will be likely probable that that is more relevant to you. So and also it establishes relationships like higher the weight between two corrections, so that will be like of more significance. And, so it provides us a relationship between all of them.
Okay, so just to collate all of this that has been said. So as Shravya rightly mentioned that the machine learning does all of this, right. So it's not one is different from the other, it's a journey. So of course this one is able to all these things at the moment. So but when we want to move to machine learning, in addition to all that is before that, what it can do, to put it in again in a very in a more general term, is that it can act better than a human cognition. That is what artificial intelligence are headed towards, that you can do all these much more efficiently and much more complicated fashion. So, you are trying to build a more complicated machine than the human brain, which is modeled after a human brain. That is what neural network talks about, right. that's the network that our brains operate on, but it's trying to do so that all this can be somehow automated, right? And what it can also do, that if it can learn from its previous experiences. So, let us say I have drawn some prescriptive insights from the data sets that I have been working on, but if it is not working, I am able to change, I am able to correct the algorithm and try and fit in the outliers. That was not possible possible in the previous algorithms or the previous data tools. Clear? Okay. Now, who are the key players? So, now this is the material world in which the data operates, right. So, we talked about the kinds of data that it exists, the types of data that exist, and how data are stored, what are the platforms that exist, how we draw insights from that data which makes data so attractive, and also the the analysis that are run on this data. So, this is what you hear when these days, like these are the buzzwords of current times: machine learning algorithms, AI, cognitions, neural networks, cloud, all these things, right. So, now how all these things are taking place. So, what we are saying, so these are data subjects, these are we, okay. There are two major players. I am not saying they are just two players in the sense of numbers of players, but these are the two segments, the major segments of players. One is the corporations, big corporations who are interested in this, and the state. So, for the corporate, so what we are talking about, that we are generating this data, right. Now, this data is somehow running through these algorithms which are mostly proprietary, right. So, I do not know what algorithm Facebook runs, that is their IP, that is their intellectual property, okay. So, it runs through these algorithms, and then new data is generated which I am again consuming. Clear? On the other side, then we see the state who are equally interested. So, for the corporates, it's so this, you must have heard this, right, data is the digital currency, right. So, by running those algorithms that we were just talking about, we are able to generate these insights which makes the data that digital currency. That is what you are selling, the insight, right. Because you are able not just use these techniques and the volume, the storage capability that we have, along with all these machine learning techniques, we are able to generate insight, we are able to mine data in an unprecedented volume, right, and we are able to draw insights which are of extremely sophisticated nature. That is what make data a very profitable commodity, right. Now, why state is interested in it? So, what the state is interested in the data for, that it knows more the subjects, knows more about the subjects, right, its subjects, and then it can use it. That is, you must have heard the term evidence based policy making, right. So, this is what the state is interested in. So, it knows not only about, let us say, your gender and your educational qualification, it knows what is your bank financial data is like, how you do transaction on the financial space, what movies you watch, what e-commerce platform that you use, what sort of social network that you maintain, what is your political opinion, all these things, right. So, your consumer behavior, your political ideology, your social behavior, everything is at the tip of a data, right. So, state of course is interested in this data. So, there also, I mean not so much, maybe the Indian state, maybe Aadhaar would be an example of that, but in US this is already, there are examples where the state also runs these proprietary algorithms on the data that it collects on its citizens to make better decisions, better policies, and also laws and regulations, right. So, this is pretty much how the key players. So, looking at us as the data subject and then looking at how we are sort of governed both by the corporates and the state as a data subject, right. Now, this is what the material aspect of data. So, that how the technically speaking it works, like all these things that you buzzwords that you hear about, this is what pretty much it sums up to. Of course, it's a just a session, you can do a whole course on this, but I just want to stop here and ask, is there any clarification that you need? No? Okay, so we move on. Now we are trying to look at the other axes that we talked about, the material and the social. So let us see what's the social implications of all these material things that are taking place. And of course, when we mean social, there can be many things that we can talk about, but for this session, I have just focused on the notion of identity, right. So we were talking about socio-technical assemblage, right, yesterday, which basically means that technologies do take place where it's a gathering of different actors, and these different actors can be artifacts, can be text, can be people, can be organizations, can be languages, all these things that we were talking about. Now, how can we understand digital data as a socio-technical assemblage? So, this is again I am summing up what I just said, right. So, of course, then there is this data subject, this is the data I am generating, which is run on a proprietary algorithm, which is creating certain kinds of data doubles, that is a word usually used. So, basically let us say if I am going to buy ticket from MakeMyTrip, that is my travel identity. So, MakeMyTrip would know, you would get offers from MakeMyTrip for certain, let us say if you go a lot to Delhi, right. So, most of your offers would be around that. So, so that is your travel identity. Then if you use Swiggy or Zomato, right, that is your consumer identity in a very specific segment, right. So, all these and then you use social media data. So, all this data that you are generating, passing through these algorithms and creating certain identities of yours, that is a profit proposition for the corporations, and accordingly new data that is being channeled to your way, right. And on the other side, it is pretty much running on the same way, it is just the purpose of doing this is slightly different. So, there it is mostly trying to look at you as a consumer, and the state is looking at you more as a citizen, right, or the subject to be governed. Now, I want to focus a little bit on this data driven identities that we are talking about here.
So, where does, for example, let us say a university as an example comes in, because it's not strictly, I mean, it is for profit, the university I suppose, but it's not a pure corporate enterprise. But at the same time, they would love to get their hands on some data so they can tailor courses according to you or whatever, right? But where do they fall in this equation, just as an example?
Okay, so why as I said, so it's not like I'm not trying to exhaust the number of players here. I just club them on the basis of the motivations for which they are interested in the data. So let's say if I am trying to govern my students with the data, so it's not just about selling my course, right? So it can be have a profit motive. It also can be that I want to give them a better experience when they come here, right? So, and of course, if I break these things down, there will be overlaps, right. So, state and the corporates in this case work pretty much in a nexus. So, even sometimes motive wise you cannot really differentiate, right. So, okay, I think it's a very good question you asked at this point. So, this is just to give structured what I am talking about. I have tried to club them on the basis of their motivations, because we were talking about that in a socio-technical assemblage, the different actors have different motivations. Sometimes these motivations are not in sync with each other, but they have some sort of alliance, that agreement that they form, because of which this whole ecosystem sort of works, right? So that's how I just try to club these two depending on the motivations, the two different kinds of motivations. And of course, if educational institution can go on either of those or can be both at the same time. So it's not very watertight in that way. Does that answer your question? Okay. And there can be many more, right?
So more like shade of grey, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah.